Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to show 6 different layered nail art designs on short nails. Now, these techniques can be used on longer nails as well, but with shorter nails, layering things can tend to get tricky because shorter nails can look bulky really fast. So you can apply these same techniques to longer nails, but I'm specifically showing them on shorter nails to show you how to reduce bulk. So the first design I want to talk about is layering loose glitters and marbling. So over here I have this palette over here where I kind of mixed a bunch of colors together for a marble. And the reason why I think this is important to kind of like get the idea of and to kind of master with like the layering aspect is that the glitters can be kind of chunky and sometimes marbling can end up a bit bulky as well. So combining these two, if you are not careful and not cognizant of all the different layers going on, you can end up with a really bulky nail. So I'm going to show you how to work with it and how to make sure that you don't end up with too much bulk. So I'm starting off with base coat on this painted nail over here. And this is going to be the sticky layer that the glitters, the loose glitters, stick into. So I'm not going to cure this yet. And I'm making a very thin layer. This is not a top coat. It doesn't need to embed anything. It's really just to add some stick. So next I'm taking a brush and I want to use these white glitters over here. So I'm just taking some of the glitters here and gently placing them down. Now you can see when you get up close, they're kind of like layered on top of each other and creating a lot of bulk. So what you want to do is make sure that they're really not layered or sitting on top of each other, or if they are, if you want like a layered look, to make sure that like it's not too bulky. So this is kind of not tedious, but it's kind of like you just got to be careful. You're not sugaring the nail with this, so you're not just going to pour a whole bunch of glitter on the nail and call it a day. You really want to be careful with the placement and make sure that it doesn't end up bulky. So you can see when there are too many flakes of glitters sitting on top of each other, I make sure to pull them apart and just place them in a place where they won't get too thick. And because these are shorter nails, you do want to be careful. You don't have a lot of room to get too bulky and kind of futz around with it. So it's kind of like you want to get it right pretty much on the first go. And you want to keep the thinner, smaller beads, glitters to the side with the larger ones in the middle, because there's more space in the middle, there's more height in the middle of the nails because it is a curved tip. So you want to keep the bigger, chunkier ones in the center and the smaller ones to the side so they don't add bulk to the sides over here. Now that I've got the glitter placed where I want it, I am going to give this a full cure. So that's 60 seconds to cure the base coat and make sure that the glitters are stuck in place. Once that's all cured, I'm going to take this 5-in-1 top coat from Vettsy. It is a top coat, but it's also a builder consistency. It's, as you can see, it's quite thick and there's got a lot of stretch to it. See how it's like slowly pulling away from the bottle. And I'm going to use this to encapsulate the glitters over here because I'm going to put the marble on top, but if I just put the marble straight over here, it's still bumpy and rough because you know, there's just a bunch of glitter there and it's not covered over, and putting the marble straight on top of that or any kind of art on top of that would just end up lumpy, bumpy, and not smooth, or might not even transfer at all. So the next thing we're going to do is encapsulate this design. And again, with short nails, this is where you kind of have to be careful. You can get really thick really fast, and that's really what we're trying to avoid here. So I start by putting down a thin layer, and I really don't need too much. It's really just to encase the whole thing and make sure that there are no lumps and bumps. So if you were doing like a longer nail or nail that needed an apex, then you would actually have to use more product. But because this is a short nail, it doesn't really need too much of an apex, so I'm not going to be building this up too high. It's really just to get a thicker layer over the nail so that there are no lumps and bumps. So just starting out really thin. trying to keep the sides as thin as possible. So dragging off any extra product that doesn't really need to be there. The better you apply this, the less filing you have to do. So it's a good idea to try to get this as straight as possible. That's applied pretty nice. You can see it doesn't add too much thickness to the nail, but it covers up all of the design so that there's no bulk and it's nice and smooth. So this is going to get a full cure, and then I'm going to file just to make sure that it's even along the sides. That's cured. I'm going to go in with a lint-free top coat and just remove any kind of shininess from the nail. The top coat that I used is technically a no wipe and it doesn't leave a sticky layer behind, but when I do filing, I like to go in with a bit of alcohol just to make sure that there is nothing for the nail file to kind of get gunked up with. Again, this was a no wipe, but just for extra insurance, I was like going in with a bit of alcohol just to make sure that there's nothing that can mess up my file or mess up the filing. So as you can see, it's pretty straight here. There's a bit of a dip over here, you can see, and that's probably because there wasn't too much glitter over here, so the gel kind of like flowed in. So just to keep everything straight and smooth and make sure there are no lumps and bumps, I'm just going to use a buffer and smooth it out. This also helps reduce any extra bulk that might have been there, because sometimes it's hard to see the bulk of a nail until it's complete. You kind of don't want to risk going through all of your file, all of your like designing and shaping and everything, only to find out that once you're finished with everything, it looks kind of bulky. So it's a good idea to just go in with a bit of a buff, remove any extra, because when it comes to nails, even the tiniest mistake or tiniest extra lump or bump will make a huge difference in the end, especially on short nails. So it's like, it might not look too thick now, but once we add more layers and more layers and more layers, that tiny little extra bump could be the difference between a bulky nail or a nice thin nail. So it's worth going in and just filing it and keeping every layer as thin as you possibly can so that the overall look is as thin as possible. This also helps mattify the nail, and I like doing nail art on top of a matted nail anyway, so this just kind of helps do 2-in-1 instead of putting another layer of a matte top coat to do the design. This just kind of takes care of it in one go. So I'm thinning it out and mattifying the nail so that I don't have to go in with another layer, because every layer makes a difference. That is looking pretty good. So I'm going to go in with alcohol again and just remove any dusties. And now it's time for the marble. So like I showed you before, I put out the colors that I want to use for the marble here on my palette, and I kind of mix them together a bit just to kind of get the colors flowing. And now I'm going to use an ombre brush, and I'm going to scoop up a whole bunch of that design and slowly start to float it onto the nail. You can put a base coat on here to help with the flow, or even a blooming gel to help the colors flow nicely together. And I do that often if I want the colors to really mesh. But for this design, I really want the colors to kind of stay where I put them. I didn't want them to bleed too much into each other. I really wanted it to be very clear that they're separate colors, and I didn't want them to blend too much. So I didn't do that for this design, but you definitely can if you want a better blend. And just wiping off the nail because I don't want it to get, the brush to get too bulky. And I'm going to go in again, scoop up more of that design, and place it down. And you can see that the marble does add a bit of height to the nail, which is why we want the nail to be as thin as possible with each layer. Because if the nail had been bulky, then the marble would have ended up bulky, and we don't want bulk. The whole point is that we don't want that. We want it to be as thin as possible. I really like how this is looking, so I'm going to cure this and give this a full 60-second cure. And now to add one more detail before finishing off with a top coat, I'm going to add these tiny little foils. I just wanted a bit more silver to pop through. So again, just adding the teeniest amount. We don't want it thick, don't want it bulky. Just want the tiniest bit. And now to finish up with a top coat, because I want those glitters in the background to pop, I'm going to add just the slightest bit. Now, I don't think this needs to be encapsulated the same way that I encapsulate the glitters, so I'm just going to do a top coat. But if your marble ended up a bit thick, or the foils or anything that you might have added in addition to that ends up a bit thick, then you might want to do another layer of encapsulation like we did with the glitters, and file again to make sure that it's thin. And here is the final look. You can see the little glitters behind with the marble on top. And you can see from the side how thin that nail is. We didn't get too bulky. So the next layering technique I want to cover is glitters and stamping. So it kind of has this similar concept to embedding glitters and then doing art on top of it. That's essentially what we're doing here. We're kind of just putting in a thin layer of glitter, sparkle, anything that we like embedding in our nails, and then encapsulating it and doing art on top of it. The key to all of this really is keeping it thin. And when you're doing nail art with stamping, the stamping that you want to do typically, if you want the glitters to shine through, is something that has like a lot of spaces between the designs. So you don't want to do like really a full cover design of stamping on top of a glitter nail, because it'll kind of hide everything. So you really want to go for maybe florals, or maybe only covering part of the nail with a stamping design, or something that will allow the colors to shine through, because the whole point is we want the layers to be visible. So again, going in with just some glitters over here. And because stamping is much thinner than marbling than the marbles that we did before, you kind of have a lot more leeway with what you're embedding, because stamping is not very thick. It doesn't add too much bulk to the nail, but we still want to keep it thin. You just have a bit more room to play. So you can see these glitters over here are quite thick and chunky and sitting up on top of over the nail over here. So you kind of want to make sure that they are as flat as possible, and that's where embedding and filing is going to play a big part. Because even though individually these flecks are not that large, they kind of stick up from the nail quite a lot. So when we embed, we want to make sure we're covering the whole thing, and then any filing that we do will kind of remove anything that sticks up between the embedding. But we really don't want to have to file through the design. We want to make sure it's as thin as possible when we first start. So this is getting quite thick already at this point, so I think I'm going to leave it there. Just remove the glitters from, just grab a wipe and remove the glitters from the sides. I don't want this to get too bulky, so from under. Now I'm going to cure this, and then we'll do the encapsulating layer. So here's the nail after it came out of the lamp, and as you can see, there is quite a lot of glitter sticking up. So that's going to be dealt with the encapsulation layer and with filing. So going in with that same top coat, start with a thin layer. and then going in with another layer to encapsulate the whole design. And again, we don't want it too bulky, but at the same time, we want to make sure that everything is covered so that when we file, we don't actually file off anything that's attached to the nail that we want to stay there. We really are only going to file off anything that sticks up too high, but we don't want to file through the whole design. So it's better to do a thicker layer and file a bit just to make sure that you don't ruin your design. Just gonna add a bit more over here at the center. Take up the sides. And now for the most part, that's all encapsulated. You can see that there's some lumps and bumps from the glitters that stick up a bit high. So we are definitely going to file that down. So you can see it's quite lumpy and bumpy. That's going to be fixed with filing, so we're going to give this a full cure and then file smooth. When I'm wiping the nail over here, I can actually feel the lint-free pad getting stuck on the little glitters that are sticking up, so that definitely tells me that we need to do some good filing here. A little bit of pad got pulled on from the glitter. Definitely need some good filing. So going in again with a buffer. This is going to smooth out the encapsulation layer and also file off any glitters that are sticking through. Because at this point, we don't want those on the nail. Yeah, I can definitely feel it getting smoother. We also want to make sure we get the sides and reshape if anything kind of gets stuck hanging off the sides of the nails. Definitely smoother. Still lumpy from the encapsulation layer, but most of the glitters that were sticking up have been filed off, so that's good. See that little lumpy bumpy? Time to get rid of that. She is all filed and smoothed out. It's time for stamping. And like I said before, you want to use stamping design that has like a lot of spaces in it so you can see the glitters coming through. If you do something that's a little too dense or too thick, you won't see the glitters and it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So I thought that these mandalas over here from Clear Jelly Stamper, it's in collaboration with someone. I don't know who they are, but I really like this mandala plate over here, and you can see that there's lots of spaces between the designs, so having this with the glitters will be really nice so that the glitters can peek through. So I think I'm gonna go for this design over here. I like how that looks, and I wanted to do blue, so I am grabbing this stamping polish over here from Clear Jelly Stamper. And this definitely is not going to cover the whole nail. It's too big. It's not gonna, you're not gonna see the whole design on the nail because the nail is quite small. You're just gonna kind of get a piece of it, which is fine. I think that would be a really cool look as well. So just layering over the stamping. I like filling in the grooves as much as possible, just helps with a smooth scraping. Scrape, stamper, pick it up, and I'm kind of just gonna take off these other designs here so they don't end up on my nail. Now taking the design, and I'm going to place it centered over the nail here. I waited a bit too long. The polish kind of dried a bit on the stamper, because I'm stamping it on a matte surface. It's not really transferring as easily as it normally would. That's okay, just hold it down a bit, put a bit of pressure, and it will transfer nicely. Actually, that didn't transfer as well as I had hoped, so let's try that again. Now to finish off with a top coat to bring the glitters in the background to life. So the next layering technique I want to show is with foils and stamping, and I found these really pretty holographic butterfly foils and I wanted to use them. So starting off with foil gel, I'm going to apply a nice layer, not too thick, not too thin. Give that a 60-second cure, and then we'll be ready for the foils. Once that's been cured, I'm gonna go in with my foil, and I'm really trying to get as many butterflies as I can on here, but they're quite spread out though. Butterflies, dragonflies, all of them. And I always feel like I need to pull the nail off the stamp thing. I find that it gets in the way when I'm trying to do foils. I just need like to be able to put a ton of pressure on. A bit over here that got wrinkled. All right. And there we have our little holographic butterflies. And next we're going to do stamping on top of them, but this layer of foil gel that doesn't have any of the foil on it is quite sticky, and I really don't want to do any kind of stamping on top of that. I feel like it just won't transfer over nicely. So I'm going to put a layer of top coat, actually base coat. I'm going to do a layer of base coat over this just to reduce the stickiness that the nail currently has. And I'm going to give that a 30-second cure. While that's curing, I wanted to show you the stamping image that I want to use. I love this like viney, leafy image over here, and I want to do that all over the nail, and that is going to like cover the butterflies and the dragonflies that are on the nail, but that's the point, it's supposed to be layered. So this is the image that I'm going to use, and I'm going to use a green stamping polish. Here's a stamping polish I'm going to use. It's from Clear Jelly Stamper, and I am going to fill up this image here. And I'm going to scrape, pick up, and remove any of the other images that got lifted up, because I don't want that to end up on my nail. Now that that's out of the lamp, I'm going to go in with the stamping. This is the stamping polish that I'm using from Clear Jelly Stamper. I'm just going to fill in this design here. Scrape. Pick up. And I'm just going to remove the designs that I don't want so they don't end up on my nail. And then going to stamp it down onto the nail. Now that the foil has been transferred, I'm going to go in with a matte top coat. I prefer doing stamping over a matte top coat. I just find that the stamping tends to just stick better. So I'm just going in with some matte top coat. Don't want it to get too thick, of course, that's the whole point. I'm now going to give that a full cure, and then we'll do the stamping. Now that that's out of the lamp, you can see it's all mattified, and I'm going to use this image over here. It's kind of like these this viney image, and I really like how it looks. So I'm going to use that, place down the polish, scrape, pick up, and then I'm just going to remove the other images that kind of got picked up alongside it. I don't want those on my nail. And then stamping down onto my nail. Now, because it's matte, you can't really see the butterflies and dragonflies behind it, so we are definitely going to give that a shiny top coat. Especially because the butterflies in the background are holographic, having them matte just kind of really loses its specialness to it, so we're just going to give that a top coat. Now you can see the butterflies and the dragonflies peeking through the vines. So for this next design, I want to encapsulate these like floral little bits over here, these dried flowers, and do it alongside with a marble over here. So as you can see, I blended the colors over here on this palette, and I'm going to place them on the nail. So contrary to the marble that I did in the beginning, that one I didn't want it to like blend out too much and to kind of like fade a bit, but for this one I do, and I am going to have the marble covering the whole background of the nail. So I'm starting with a base coat, and I'm not going to cure it. And like before, I am grabbing my ombre brush, and I'm going to scoop up the marbling over here, and just going to place it down lightly. And because it's on a wet base coat layer, it's really going to start blending out. If my camera would focus, hello. There, you can see it's really kind of blending into the base coat. So that's not what I wanted with the first design, but it is what I want for this design, so. So you can see with this design, the colors really mesh into each other much more than the previous design because of that base coat layer. So I'm going to cure that before it blends into nothing, and then we'll be back with the encapsulation flower. So as I'm looking at this marble, I think we need a bit more purple. So what I'm going to do is put down another base coat layer, just a thin one, just so that we can get like the blending effect. And just grabbing my brush that had the purple that I used on it, I'm going to just drag a bit more purple through the design. I felt like it kind of got lost. And because I put down that base coat layer, it's just going to mesh really nicely in with the other colors. Kind of drag it out a bit so it doesn't look too obvious that it was added later. Now I did want this to be lighter colors, so I'm not trying to go for vibrancy here. I just wanted a bit more purple. Now that that's all kind of spread out nicely like that, I'm going to give that a cure. So here are these two petals over here that I want to put onto the nail, and this is going to get encapsulated because, as you can see, they're not thick, but they definitely add thickness to the nail, especially when the nail is so short. So I'm going to stick these on with some base coat again. Base coat is such a multifunctional product for me. I use it for practically everything. So putting on base coat to use as a sticky layer. And then just grabbing a pair of tweezers here and placing down the flower. Now I don't want to put the whole petal down onto the nail because it'll just take over the whole thing. So I'm kind of putting it off to the side. And yes, it's sticking off the nail. We're going to remedy that. First, we just have to get it on the nail. Okay, now that the flowers are on the nail, I'm going to cure these in place. And then after it's cured, we'll deal with the flower bits that are hanging off the side of the nail. Now that the flowers have been cured into place, I'm just going to use a small scissor and cut off the bits that are hanging off the nail. And it looks like that part didn't really stick down very nicely, so I'm going to do another layer of base coat, just right over there. Hold that down and stick that into the light. Now that everything's in place, I'm going to go in with top coat and encapsulate the whole thing. At this point, I'm sure you've kind of gotten the technique. You do thin layer, make sure the whole thing is encased in the gel, and then file smooth. There's still some jaggedy edges hanging off the sides of the nails here and stuff. I couldn't get too close with the scissor, but once everything's encapsulated, I'm just going to file that off with a file. You can see over here also, it's kind of sticking off the nail pretty far. But again, couldn't get that close with my scissors, so I'm just going to encapsulate over it, make sure everything's in place, and then fix it with the filing. Making sure to get all of the sides. we'll give that a full cure and then file. After wiping the nail with alcohol, I don't understand why my camera's having such a hard time focusing today. I'm going to go in with a 100 grit file and reshape. So I'm going to file off everything that's been hanging off the edges and causing the nail to get wonky. After the shaping, I'm going to go in with the buffer, smooth out the whole thing, make sure there are no lumps and bumps. Essentially, the trick with layering different types of nail products together, be it glitters or different types of art like marbling or encapsulating different things, is really just making sure you're doing decent layers of top coat or builder gel or something clear in the middle so that you can create a barrier between the different layers so they don't end up bulking up or compromising the design. Like, for example, if you just put stamping right on top of a glitter, it wouldn't stamp very nicely. So we really just want to get a good layer in between all of the designs so that we can file and shape in between so that everything has a smooth, clean surface to go on. Now going to wipe off all the dusties with some alcohol. And finally, top coating. Top coating, you can see, really brings out like the veining and stuff in the flowers there. So the next technique I want to show is stamping and watercolor. I am still new to the watercoloring game, but I've played around with it a bit and I really enjoy it, and I like pairing it with stamping. So that is what we are going to do for this design. So first I want to start by stamping down the images that I want to color in. So with this design itself, actually, the plate itself kind of has a bit of like a watercolor effect if you would do all stamping with it. So this design definitely lends itself to this kind of artwork, but instead of just stamping down all of the colors and creating a watercolor nail art situation, I'm going to stamp down the backgrounds, or rather the outlines, and then I'm going to fill in the color with the watercoloring instead. So I'm going to start with this column over here, with this floral outline, with these leaf outlines, and then as I go, if I think I need a little bit more stamping, I'll go in with that afterwards. So starting off with this flower, so there's the flower, and then I'm going to do a couple of leaves. Actually, I think that leaf might be just a bit too much filled in, so I'm going to use this one over here. There we have that leaf. And then I'm gonna do this one over here as well, I think. Just clean off the plate a bit. And maybe a little one right over here just to fill in that gap. I think I'm going to do actually this one. It's a full background design. It's not like very detailed, but I think that could be fun to paint in. Oh, actually, that doesn't really work very well, does it? And for the final leaf, just to fill in that little empty space over there, I'm just gonna go in with this one right here. And pop that in right over there. So there are the outlines, and then I'm going to fill it in with the watercolors. So I've got my palette here and a little bit of water. Just going to dip my brush in and kind of soften up the bristles. And then go in. So this is a sunflower, so I want to keep it in like the yellowy gold realm. So I'm just going to start mixing up the color a bit. I'm still trying to figure out like the ratio between like water and paint. So that's something I'm still working on, but for now, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to fill in the petals over here. I know people use like certain watercolor brushes and stuff, and I'm definitely not using a brush that's made for watercolor. So if you do watercoloring on nails and you see a real difference between like the types of brush that you use, let me know. And if that's something that I need to invest in, then that is something I'll definitely do. I just don't know if it's like that necessary, if it really makes a difference. So if you're familiar, then let me know in the comments down below. Is it something I should look into? I think I have a bit too much water there, so I'm just gonna kind of remove it a bit. Because I don't have that much familiarity with watercolors, I don't know if this is how it's supposed to go. Is it supposed to be this consistency? Are the watercolor paints supposed to be moving like that? Is it my brush? Is it my ratio? I don't know, I'm still learning, but I'm enjoying the process while doing so. See how the water's bubbling up like that? Like the paints are bubbling up? Is that because I have too much water? This design is definitely giving slightly abstract. And again, I don't know if it's my technique, my brush, but I don't hate how it's coming out. I think I just need to fuss with it a bit. Grab a bit more water. I want to make sure that you can still see like the outlined petals. Otherwise it kind of just looks like a blob and doesn't really look much like a flower, does it? So So I think I'm gonna let that sit, and then I'm going to move on to the leaves, the greenery. So I'm definitely gonna do that in green. Maybe it's the image I chose to stamp down. Maybe that's not the best image, but I thought it would look nice. Yeah, I like how that green is looking. I do enjoy the watercoloring. I think I just need to practice a bit more, but that's, you know, it's like everything else in life. Ooh, I like how that leaf came out. Yes. That is very cute. I like that. I love sunflowers. I think they are so beautiful and they make me happy. So I'm happy to be using that design on this nail here. So I really like how the leaves came out. It's really just the sunflower itself that I'm not loving, so I think I need to fix that up a bit, add some more water, kind of thin it out, and refigure that. So cleaning off my brush. And now I've got some water on the brush. I'm going to kind of like clean up this yellow here. It's kind of a bit messy, and I have a rogue sparkle. So what happens when you do nails, you just get sparkles in everything. Get out of there, sparkle. It's stuck in the brush. I think I got it. Okay. So I think what this flower is missing for it to look cohesive the way I want, is the center. So I'm going to stamp that because the stamping plate has the image that's needed for that. And then I'll see if that needs any more additional watercolor. So let me stamp that down, and then let's see what we can do from there. So I stamped down the center of the flower, and I think it's definitely making it look more like a flower. But I do feel like it just needs a bit more something. So I'm gonna go in with this gold watercolor here and fill in the gaps in the center here. Add a bit of sparkle. You can see the yellow that I put down on the flower is kind of like all moved along the edges and kind of disappeared. So again, I don't know if that's my technique or my brush, because it worked really nicely on the green leaves over here. The leaves look really nice. I like how that looks. So I think maybe I just had a bit too much water. So I'm gonna go in again, attempt another try, and really not pick up too much water. Let's see, I'm gonna be a little bit more deliberate with my placement. Yeah, I think that's working better. All about the ratios. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe not my best work, but I think it looks cute, and I think it adds to the abstractness of it. I do like how the leaves came out. I think those came out really pretty. Now that the watercolor has dried, I'm going to go in with a top coat, and I'm going to be careful not to like drag it too much. I kind of want to float it on top just so I don't rehydrate the watercolor and kind of mess it up. So really doing very light floaty strokes. And there she is. Definitely leave your watercolor nail art tips down below because I can definitely improve, but I do like how this came out. The final design I want to go over for this video is chrome and foil. Layering on top of chrome can be a bit tricky because it kind of doesn't really like to be layered on top of, but we're going to force it with the design I'm going to show you today and the techniques that I'm going to show you. So starting off with a no wipe top coat, I'm going to put that on the nail and cure it for half the time it requires. So when you're doing chromes, the top coat that you're using, you want to make sure it's no wipe, and you only cure it for half the time that it's supposed to be cured. So this one calls for a 60-second cure when you're using it just as a straight top coat. So for chromes, I almost said foils. For chromes, we are going to only cure it halfway. So we're going to do a 30-second cure as opposed to a 60-second cure. Now that she is half cured, I'm going to go in with this spongy rubber applicator thing. I've really been liking it for chrome. I'm going to dip it into the chrome here and start rubbing it on into the nail. Ooh, look at that color. That is stunning. I love like burnt oranges, rusty orange, orangey browns, all those kinds of colors, all those like rusty, earthy fall tones. Definitely those are my color schemes. And this is so beautiful. This is really stunning. I love this chrome. I've never used it before. This is actually my first time using it and I don't understand why. Definitely going to be using this more because it's flawless. Stunning. Okay, so you can see that this rubber tip applicator thing is really great for chrome. It just rubs it in really well. And then going to remove any excess that didn't get pushed in. We're going to give that a full cure. Now the texture that chrome leaves behind doesn't really lend itself to much art on top of it. It's kind of really slick and smooth, but it's not sticky or in any way. So like I do with most of the nail art that we've been doing with putting different layers in between to create a smooth surface, what I'm going to do is go in with a matte top coat on top of the chrome to create a barrier between the chrome and the foil that I want to put on top next. And that way it won't really mess up the foil gel that has to go over it. So I'm starting with a matte top coat, and it doesn't need to be encapsulated the same way the other designs did because it's not like it's too thick or bulky or sticking up off the nail, but I do want to do a bit of a thicker top coat, just kind of something a little bit more substantial so that there's a nice big barrier between the chrome and what's coming next. And I kind of missed a little space over here when I was doing the chrome, but that's okay because we're doing art on top of it, so hopefully it'll get covered up. So again, it's not an encapsulating layer, but it's like a nice thick layer. And we'll give that a cure. Like with all the other layered nail art that we've been doing, you want to be able to see the layers. You don't want to cover it up all the way, otherwise there's not really a point. So I chose this foil that is kind of like lace. Over here you can see there's lots of spaces between it, and I thought the chrome would look really pretty peeking out through here. So now that the nail has been cured with a matte top coat, I'm going to go in and do some foil gel. So now going in with the foil on top of the nail. Down. And again, I always need to take it off the stand. I find it gets in my way. I can't really put the pressure that I want. rotating the nail so I can get pressure at all different angles. I like scratching it in a bit sometimes when I get wrinkles. It's the best way to get the foil to transfer over. And here we go. That's really pretty. That's really gorgeous. Oh, and it's gonna look even better with a top coat because that will bring the chrome back to life. So let's do a top coat and finish off this nail. And here are all of the designs. Let me know which one was your favorite, which technique was your favorite. Here is the mandala with the glitters, the marble with the glitters, stamping with the foils, the marble with the encapsulated dried flowers, the stamping with the watercolor, and the chrome with the foil. Let me know which one was your favorite, which technique was your favorite, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!